UST is a algorithmically backed stablecoin, and the best way to kind of go into it is compare it to Tether and USDC. So Tether and USDC are collateralized.
I sold my cool pets and I bought Alien Friends. Our good friend Carne Asada Chris, who's pretty deep in there. We actually both minted that one.
The problem is that people at the bottom can't like afford things anymore, right? It's not even so much like this guy is way richer than me. I hate when people say like wealth inequality because it's like it's kind of stupid. Like I don't care if the guy in the room next to me is a trillionaire if I have like $20 million.
And cheers to the man whose seat is empty.
Cheers.
EJ, Mr. Eric Johansson, Mr. Crypto CFA, we miss you.
We'll be docking your pay.
Major pay reduction. Eric isn't here. First time ever we're missing anybody. And the second time in a row that we're doing this in person, which is really fucking exhilarating. And I had a few people ask me if we'd be willing to do this live. I know we've been discussing that as well. And it keeps coming up. So if you guys want us to do this live, which we would literally just be right here in person like we're doing, but we actually have the ability to go on YouTube Live or Instagram Live or whatever platform it might be, you guys would be able to join, literally listen, watch, and even ask questions throughout the episode. If you want that, hop in our Discord, let us know. The Discord link, by the way, is in the description below, or just go to Alfalfa Pod. Alfalfa Pod? It sounded like from Minnesota.
Yeah, no. Boston, the car pack.
Alfalfapad.com.
That's not what people from Minnesota sound like.
Do you want to know what people from Minnesota sound like?
Yeah.
I used to live in Minnesota. Are you going to challenge me on this?
Apparently not.
6 months, Stephen. 6 terrible months.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, when I first worked at 3M.
What? Oh, that's right.
St. Paul. That's not what they sound like. St. Paul, Minnesota. Every Minnesotan is like freaking out right now.
Losses.
They can't say bag. They have trouble saying bag. Yeah, big. And they have trouble with my name. Armand's a tongue twister over there. Armin? Hey, Armin. I've heard that one a few times. Okay, cutting my losses. Anyway, jump in the Discord, link below. And if we did this live, it would be when we're doing it right now, which is Wednesdays at about 5:30 Pacific. So, yeah, and there's a lot of conversation happening in the Discord that isn't happening here. Right now, we're talking about stable coins and Lido and liquid staking in general and things like that. So hop in. All right, boys, anything else?
You want to mention Collective Shift?
Yes. Hop into Collective Shift as well. We have a free trial right now. We're actually reducing it. Things are changing, so you're going to want to jump in before we take this free trial offer away. Link is below as well. Use the code Alfalfa. And for those of you that don't know, Collective Shift is a crypto education and research platform. And you can get 7 days free trial for $1. Hop in and let them know we sent you. So Alfalfa fire round, alpha round, I should say. May I go second or third, not first? I have some fire that I want to save.
Let's see. What did I do this week? I took some stable coins and I've been DCAing back into Lux Rare. Last 3 days, it's been going up on me. Wish I would have just dumped it all on the first day, but so far so good. And they have a new compounding feature to the rewards, so just get a little slightly higher APY on the rewards. And yeah, I mean, still long-term bullish on it. So I bought some and staked it. I think the APY is around 250%. I almost took that money and bought an MFer, but probably gonna be bad decision. We'll see.
You think buying the MFer will be a bad decision?
No, maybe buying
like
the Lux instead of the MFer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm also just waiting for my Link small batch to just like somehow stop bleeding against ETH so I can trade it back to ETH. Probably never going to happen.
You still have Link?
Yeah, just leave me alone. Leave me alone.
That's cool.
Anyway, it's just a sad chart to look at. Big sad on the Link ETH chart. Just bleeds against ETH constantly. I don't know.
I mean, Chainlink was my third biggest holding for years. Yeah. So I feel you.
Anyway, yeah, that's all the action for this week.
I like it. Go for it.
Yeah, I think I quadrupled my NFT exposure after a week or two ago, talking about how I wanted to take it down to 0. So,
would you quadruple with
that?
Disclose.
I got like 2 involved in Raid Party.
So you quadrupled down on Raid Party.
Yeah, it just keeps like sucking you in. They changed the mechanics of the game, and then I ended up with too many of the hero ones, and it turns out they're useless unless you get fighters with them. So I was like,
give the context, assuming no one has listened to previous episode.
No, I mean,
because I know this is
about Raid Party a little bit, but it's kind of like a P2E, play to earn NFT game, right? Probably the most well done one that I've seen so far. Unlike Wolf Game, you can actually play it, which has been useful. But yeah, I mean, the opening of the game, there's 2 NFTs. There's heroes and fighters. You kind of pair your fighters with heroes, and you basically fight just imaginary guys on the screen, and you earn a token called confetti, and then you use it you can upgrade your fighters, you can burn fighters to get new fighters. There's a whole bunch of stuff with the token you can do. It's got good Ponzi mechanics.
What got you to? I just wanted that more for context for people who hadn't listened to a previous episode of you talking about it. But why'd you? Is it just the mechanics are so good? It's so stimulating. Has it become? Because to play a game like this, you kind of have to be all in on just one of these. Like, it's impossible to keep up with multiple games like this.
The bad thing about this game is you can only play one team per wallet, but I bought like 25 heroes.
So you're spreading this across a bunch of wallets in order to play?
Yeah, I have 24 wallets, I think, currently playing this game right now.
Hot diggity damn.
Great user experience.
But then I realized that every hero needs, 4 to 6 fighters, and I only bought like 1 fighter per hero. So then I was faced with this decision, do I just sort of cut my losses and just sell my heroes, or do I do the idiotic thing and just quadruple down and just buy fighters for all the heroes that were just sitting there? Really, it's kind of gross because like I had like all these hero NFTs just sitting in my wallet, not doing anything for 3 weeks, and then I went back and looked at it, and I was like, wow, if I just put a fighter with all of these 3 weeks ago, I'd have an extra like $25,000 right now.
Wow.
Whoa.
But I didn't do that, and then I kind of started maybe chasing my losses a little bit. So the token price tanked, so I was like, well, seems like a good time to just go buy some heroes.
How's the token price been doing? Because in some of these PDE games, like sometimes a token may be the best, easiest, most liquid way to play, but in this case, it's not done well.
No, I mean it pumped from like 12 to 45 very quickly.
Dollars or cents? Not that it matters, but
dollars.
Okay,
dollars. What happens in these, like, the liquidity for your token is really important, right? If you have a token that only has $100,000 of liquidity, for example, if one guy just starts selling, well, the price will tank very easily, and then everybody starts panicking. Like a lot of NFT people especially are not necessarily, they don't maybe understand the concepts of like liquidity and slippage and all these things, right? They just see like number go down and it's just like panic mode. So somebody pulled a bunch of liquidity for the coin, right? So I think at one point, like, it got down to there's only like 7 or 8 ETH in the entire pool.
Scary.
And this is like a NFT project that's like been top 5 on OpenSea, right? So there's a lot of volume actually on the game, but like 6 ETH of liquidity, right? So like a couple of people started selling, and then the price went from 45 to like 30 really quick, and then it went from 30 to 20 real quick, and then pretty soon, like, you just look at the chart, it's just red candles all the way down. So when it got down to like 14 or so, I was like, nah, you can create new fighters with the token, right? So I was like, my fighters are all had like kind of crappy damage, which means they don't produce a lot of tokens. So I was like, like upgrade some of my fighters. So I bought like 900 or 1,000 confetti and just minted some new fighters, like, which is kind of near the bottom. Well, I say that, but it's probably going to go down like another 80%.
But it could be reflexive on the way up too.
I am still like really bullish on the game. I think they're doing a good job on it, and there's like all of these different, parts of the game that haven't even come out yet. And
Steven, can you give a quick, like, because I think what would be useful in this is like sharing what we're doing is definitely like amazing. But like if you don't already play the game, or if you're not going to play the game, how do we give value to people? I think it's like, what is your thinking around what you're doing and why you're doing it? Or is this literally just you're just being a degen with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would mostly recommend people don't do what I'm doing.
Okay.
So it's probably more of a cautionary tale than anything else.
Glad I asked that question.
It is. You can make a lot of money on these games. I've realized that.
Yeah.
If you take the time to understand the tokenomics and just the incentives, right, you can make a lot of money.
And that's why I said, like, you just can't do this with multiple NFT games. It's not possible for any one person.
No, I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
Right,
so there you go.
I wish I never started. I'm probably still actually up like a lot of money, just with all the rewards, because I did convert a ton of rewards to ETH at like the top. But I'm gonna end up like converting all the ETH back into the game because it's like, ooh, it looks cheap. And then
right.
But that's why it's good Ponzi-nomics. That's a sign of good Ponzi-nomics.
All right, let's move on. I guess what I would say to that is be aware that a lot of games like this are going to come out and are all modeling this sort of game structure where there's some sort of mechanics where you play, you do something, there's some action that you perform to earn, and there's like a multi-token system, let's just say, with different characters or different NFTs or different actions you can take. And I think the main thing to take away is like when you're listening to Steven or us talking about this is like the mindset approach to this. I think that's the big thing, because a lot of these games are going to start going in that direction.
I will say, like, if the P2E thing does sound interesting to you and you want to be a little bit of a degen and you think it's fun, right? I think there's 3 really good games to get into right now. You know, not financial advice. Like, this is like the type of thing, go to zero, you make like tons of money, and who the hell knows, right? Yeah. It's crazy. But Raid Party, Wolf Game is going to be going live pretty soon.
Should be.
And Wizards and Dragons is back. I think they redeployed to Polygon. They redid a whole bunch of stuff, and I know there's a lot of hype about it. But if you are going to play, like, this is kind of when you want to play. Everything's been like, all the hype's gone. Prices have died down, right? You're kind of buying into, well, you never know it's the bottom, but you're not buying into like mania right now. So all of those games are pretty good entry points if you want to have some fun and be a little bit of a degen, Okay. But like I wouldn't call it like an investable asset class.
Another one is Cool Pets, Cool Cats, Cool Pets, and their ecosystem. And actually, I sold my Cool Pets, so that's the first thing. I sold my Cool Pets and I bought Alien Friends.
Hey. Wow.
Our good friend Carne Asada Chris, who's pretty deep in there. We actually both minted that one. I paper handed that one. I sold, I think, all 5 Alien Friends that I had 4 days after I minted them, because I thought it was just going nowhere. It was just kind of sitting pretty stagnant, and I was just FOMOing into a different project. And I don't think I've told this story before, but I sold them to Gary Vee. You guys know that from our chat, but I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast.
Ultimate paper hands.
Literally paper handed my Alien Friends to Gary Vee, and I've been watching. Carne Asada Chris has been saying, you got to get back in because this coin is coming. So what they're going to do is they're going to model best practices of Bored Ape Yacht Club and everything. The coin is coming, and also Mutant Alien airdrop is coming. So that'll be something similar to, like, say, the people that own a Bored Ape were given a mutant ape or given a kennel, whatever the fuck. So I think the perks are there, and the value of this one is higher than what I had before, which was the Cool Pet. I didn't want to play the game anyway. I was just looking to exit, so I think this was a better move. The next thing is that Solana NFTs are coming to OpenSea. And so what I have been eyeing for a while, and what I researched a little while ago, I think we talked about this in one episode, maybe like a month and a half ago, was I mentioned I was looking into which Solana NFTs have the most provenance and like what I think will do well. I think this changes everything. I was going to make this move anyway, but now that there's going to be, OpenSea Marketplace, all those users access to it, I assume if it's going to go to OpenSea, it's also going to go to the Coinbase Marketplace as well. So I am hopefully tonight before my flight or tomorrow going to purchase a bunch of creatures. That's Kreechures, creatures. That is the first ever NFT on Solana, and also Solarians, which were disputed to be the first ever NFT on Solana, which is now debunked.
What
I'm buying
about-
both because the
what
confusion is always going to be there.
What about monkey business?
So,
You don't want a Solana monkey business?
I mean, aren't those like 150? What are they?
I think they're like 20,000 USD floor.
Okay. Yeah. I don't care about Solana NFTs that much, but the fact that they're coming to OpenSea, I was like, I at least want the curio card pump of Solana, you know?
I like that. I like that.
Do you have
Yeah.
any monkey business?
No, I don't even know what that is.
It's the
They're
biggest Solana NFT.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was thinking about picking one up. I
thought
think
it
there's
was-
a good bull case for Solana NFTs.
I thought it was a lot more than
I
that.
feel underexposed. Well, Solana just pumped like 30% since I looked at the price, so they might be like 30 or 40K now, knowing the way these things move. But
Yeah,
they're not cheap.
No, they're definitely not cheap. But what is cheap?
Less risk of going to zero.
What is cheap and what I would throw out to, so Solana, 260 SOL for a Solana monkey
Okay,
business.
it's about 30K now.
Yeah. So definitely by far the biggest. Oh, I haven't even heard of this D-Gods before. They usurped the degenerate Ape Academy, which I used to own. But anyway, I mean, when we're talking about creatures and stuff like that, Solarians, we're talking about something that's $500, $400 in USD. Something that's really truly affordable.
It's a lotto ticket.
Yeah.
So you're
I
gonna.
don't look at that.
How does this gonna work? You're gonna log into OpenSea, switch your network to, or I guess
Yeah.
it's
Same thing with like
connect
the
your different wallet.
Polygon
Right.
NFTs.
Okay.
But specifically me, I'm buying them in advance.
Right.
I'm buying them on,
Soul art.
Solart
God, I hate
or Salon Art, you mean?
Oh, jeez.
Or what is the other
Even
one?
worse.
Their marketplace names are
Yeah,
are
there's
weird.
what was the new one that came out? Oh, I
It's
can't remember. Got an iPhone app. Yes.
Eden,
Magic Eden?
Magic Eden.
Magic Eden,
Magic
yeah.
Eden is where I believe you have to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Salon Art is the second biggest now. So anyway, it'll be a lot easier for people because both of those sites are pretty new and pretty buggy. Yeah, Magic Eden is the other one. So that's
Cool.
it for that. So let's dive in. We have 3 topics we're covering today, as usual, on investing, policy, and life. On investing, we're hitting Luna and Terra because there's some big news that you guys know much more about, and I have some questions about. On policy, we're going to talk about the Billionaire Tax and our position on that, and just some latest news and updates as well. And then last but not least, with the life category, we're going to talk about friendship and the importance of well, I'll leave it. Why is it so funny? First of all, Steven.
I thought we were talking about mushrooms.
Well, friendship and mushrooms.
I think my tagline's a lot more clickbaity than yours.
I was going to say friendship and mushrooms. You can't have mushrooms without friendship.
Oh, you can.
First of all, I'm not trying to clickbait people. They're in the episode now.
Well, you got to get them listening to the end.
Oh, okay.
Open loop.
Can't drop
Open
off.
loop.
You got to open the loop.
Importance of friendship and a little bit about mushrooms from recently, this past weekend.
So, no ETH staking today. We're just gonna focus on the Luna.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
We'll see where it goes. All right. You want to start us off with the?
Yeah, sure. So Terra is a smart contract platform, and I think best place you could go start following Terra. And the recent news is Do Kwon on Twitter, Stable Kwon, I think on Twitter is his handle. He's quite the spicy follow these days. But anyway, Terra has a algorithmic stablecoin that tracks certain currencies. They have one for the US dollar. I believe they have for a South Korean currency. And they have the, what's it called? The SPD? The one that tracks a bundle of currencies, including euro and stuff like that.
I mean, it's basically UST.
Yeah, that's the one that matters, UST. UST is currently the 4th largest stable coin. So if you're following along the rankings, it goes Tether, USDC, Binance stablecoin, UST, the one we're going to talk about today, and then DAI. So like I mentioned, UST is a algorithmically backed stablecoin. And the best way to kind of go into it is compare it to Tether and USDC. So Tether and USDC are collateralized stablecoins. So they have assets could be actual U.S. dollars. It could be treasuries they own. In Tether's controversial stake, they own
allegedly,
yeah.
Allegedly backed by
Tether's a little tough to audit, but I believe they own some corporate debt that could be questionable. That's always been questioned. So anyway, the way that they kind of make sure that UST is pegged to the dollar is by using their Luna token, which is also called Terra, which is kind of confusing. But essentially...
Terra is the ecosystem, and Luna's the
token. And so it's collateralized by Luna. And the way they try to keep UST pegged to the dollar is with this mint and burn situation by incentivizing arbitrageurs anytime UST depegs away from $1 to buy or sell to get it back to its peg. So the best way to go through it is an example. So let's say UST depegs and goes from $1 to say 95 cents. You can essentially sell $1 worth, or sorry, 1 unit of UST for $1 worth of Luna, essentially arbitraging that 5 cent profit. So in that case, UST gets burnt, supply goes down, peg goes back up to $1, and Luna gets minted. The other scenario is where UST goes above $1. So let's say it's worth $1.05. You can essentially buy 1 unit of UST for $1 of Luna, and essentially arbitraging for, again, a 5 cent profit. Luna gets burned, UST gets minted. So essentially they're saying we're going to let the market make, pull this stable coin back to its peg by minting and burning Luna, which is the collateralized asset. And they have this maker module that kind of determines the parameters at which this thing operates. But essentially it makes sure there's always like a little bit of arbitrage opportunity to make sure that the market has an incentive to kind of bring UST back to its peg. So I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, we should probably back up a second, and I think
talk about
why people care, right? There's 2 reasons why you should care about Luna, right? One is you buy the Luna token and like number go up really, really, really high. Like what is it trading at right now? $106?
Yep.
It was like pennies like a little over a year ago, so we're talking like many, many thousand X gains, right? So that's just, people buying a crypto coin and coin go up. But UST, as you mentioned, is another interesting opportunity because UST, as you mentioned, is a stable coin. And you might say like, well, why should I buy UST instead of USDC? Why should I buy UST instead of Tether or DAI or anything else? And the main reason UST is very attractive, and the main reason that Luna is going to the moon, right? Because the way the tokenomics of Luna effectively work is that like as demand for the stable coin goes up, Luna price pumps. Right. It's very reflexive. But the reason why people want UST is because of the interest rate. So the entire Luna Terra ecosystem is really kind of built around this protocol called Anchor, which is effectively this borrowing and lending platform where you can stake UST and earn, I think currently 19.5% APY. On basically, quote unquote dollars, which in Luna's done very well this year because the world is like really, really ugly right now and nobody wants to buy anything. But if you tell somebody that, hey, you can hold on to dollars and earn 19.5%, you're like, what? That's like twice the annual return of the stock market, and I get to hold dollars. That sounds pretty good. So there's been huge demand for UST because of that Anchor interest rate, and because of that demand for UST, Luna price has also just absolutely gone to the moon. I mean, we broke all-time highs today after we thought we were like, oh, it's a double top. Nope, all-time highs again, and that I don't know when that's gonna end. So that's like the main utility for people is like buy that token, buy the stable coin, earn incredible interest. The follow-up is sort of, okay, how are you paying 20% interest?
How is Anchor actually paying 20% interest?
Yeah, so, and this is where things get a little dicey. Not to go too far into the weeds, but the collateral you use on Anchor is all like interest-bearing collateral, right? So you can bond effectively like staked Ether, which earns a yield. You can also bond Luna, which earns a yield. So part of the revenue from the protocol is coming from people's collateral, and the protocol sort of taking in that interest and paying it out. But that doesn't come anywhere near covering 20%. There's also just like a big reserve fund that's sort of just paying people out.
Inflationary, essentially, right?
Yeah, and there was a scare earlier this year. I mean, I think the Luna price went all the way down to like $30 or something, right? Went down really hard. It was a really scary time. People have thought this thing was going to blow up multiple times over the last year. Almost blew up again earlier this year. But that's when Stable Kwon, really kind of came out on Twitter. I mean, he's always been pretty vocal on Twitter.
Stable Kwon.
Mm-hmm. But he's basically running like the Elon Musk Tesla playbook from like 2016 or whoever, where everyone was shorting Tesla, and he was just like, no, I'm just going to get on Twitter and just tweet this thing up to like the moon. And everybody was basically like, fuck yeah, Elon, I believe in Elon. I'm going to buy Tesla stock. And he sort of just manifested Tesla going to the moon, by just people believing in him.
Right.
And then the everything else kind of followed as a result of that. It was sort of like backwards from like the way any other stocks sort of functions normally, But Stable Kwon's been doing that with Luna. They raised a bunch of money, right? I think they raised like $1 or $2 billion, to basically like backstop the Anchor protocol, which like restored a ton of faith in UST. Tons of money rushed back into UST because there's all this money that had been raised to back it. And then like Luna token, as a result, just did a complete 180 and just started going up again. And more recently, Do Kwon like announced that they're going to buy.
You should say who this Do Kwon is.
Oh yes, Do Kwon. We've been saying Do Kwon, but yeah, Do Kwon is the founder and like head honcho.
Terraform Labs, like the company that created this all.
He's got many billions in the bank at this point, I think, and he's just sort of like the front man for all of this. He's the guy.
So before you're about to announce the news that I think you're going to mention, I think it's important to mention that algorithmic stablecoins have been tried before. This isn't something like a new concept. And my question is, how is this different from Iron Finance? And Iron Finance had a algorithmic stablecoin, which famously Mark Cuban put some money into and lost it all. The stablecoin completely crashed. Everyone lost confidence in it, and you had this like negative feedback loop, which dropped everything to zero. And I believe they were kind of doing something similar to you described, and it might be different, but they were offering like 1,200% APRs in order to hold this thing. So it didn't have any inherent demand. It was just demand to earn yield, and that's the only reason that people held it. So is this the difference, that it's a 20% yield instead of a 1,200% yield? Or is there something different between Iron Finance and Terra that's going on?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few substantial differences. It's probably not fair to like lump them into the same thing, Yes?
Yeah, much better.
Oh,
I'm listening
my
to
mic.
you guys, so yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, Mike Nazi over here.
I know. I got to get better with the mic placement. I think we should first back up and be like, we keep saying like algorithmic stablecoin. Like, what is? I think a lot of people just think of stablecoins and they're like, oh, it's $1, but they may not think like, well, why is it $1? Where does it come from? I know you mentioned that like Tether and USDC sort of have $1 backing them in the bank, right? And then we have coins like DAI, which is from MakerDAO, and DAI is basically linked to, it's generated from like Ethereum and some other assets now that is like locked up, right?
Over collateralized.
So it's over collateralized. It's not even like one-to-one really, right? So why are we doing algorithmic stable coins in the first place? Like why are we even doing that?
Yeah.
And the reason is that like there's like a demand for something like DAI that is in excess of our ability to supply it, because DAI has to come from Ethereum, like somebody making like a vault and then like minting DAI, and until they do that, DAI can't be created, right? One of the reasons why people wanted, like they're trying to pursue this goal of the algorithmic stablecoin, right? The magic dollar-based thing that kind of comes out of nothing, is because it can scale like effectively, maybe not infinitely, but like very rapidly to meet like the demand for these things. And it's why like UST has gone from nothing to becoming this like massive asset, and why Luna has gone from nothing to becoming this massive asset, because it's kind of getting created out of nowhere to a degree. Put a couple of caveats on that, but like, it's not like there's a bunch of hard money out there backing every single UST.
Right.
There's not, right? So this quest to create a coin that maintains a dollar sort of algorithmically is like the holy grail of crypto right now, because like, think about what the worldwide market is for dollars, and it's in the trillions, right? The trillions would be like mad. Like if Luna could actually become like something, on par with like other dollar-based, like fiat dollar currencies in the world, or not even dollars, but like the euro or anything like that, we're talking valuations in the trillions. That's why people are like really hyped on it, because that would be like a huge multiple.
Hyped on Luna specifically.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What are the top concerns with an algorithmically backed stable coin that you guys think about? I mean, so yes, this sounds like the holy grail, but it also sounds like, I don't know the right analogy, like a house of cards at times.
I think it's a good analogy.
So,
like you mentioned Iron Finance before, which is this very famous algo Ponzi from the Polygon days. So over last summer when we had that big boom bust cycle on Polygon and Mark Cuban got wrecked. The main difference between something like Iron and something like Luna, right, is that the Iron token was backed by this other token, Titan. But what was Titan? It was just sort of derived its value from Iron, right? It was just like the Spider-Man meme where both of the coins are just like pointing at each other and like, I get my value from you, and like I get my value from you, and then like it just becomes like a emperor has no clothes thing. Like once people recognize that, then you get what's called like a death spiral, where somebody just burned one to get the other out, but then there's nothing in place to hold that up. It's just this like kind of like illusion. In theory, Luna. So let's just like do an extreme scenario. Like imagine the Terra ecosystem is supporting $10 trillion of market cap because it's got like economic activity that's like 50 times what Ethereum's is, right? And imagine that the UST market cap is like $1 billion. Well, now you're like, okay, well, there's $1 billion of this UST coin. I can burn it for Luna. But like this Luna thing, like this ecosystem is like $10 trillion of value. It's not a big deal if there's like a little coin here with like $1 billion of value attached to this, because in that like extreme scenario, right, there's so much inherent demand and value for the Luna token in that it's used to like run this ecosystem, right? If all Luna is used for is to sort of like burn UST, and all UST is used for is to sort of like burn for Luna, and there's no other value there, then yeah, you have this like...
So the most important word here is ecosystem.
Yes. The idea is that Luna is going to basically, jumpstart this thing and set it into orbit, right? You can think of it like if you can get the spaceship going fast enough and high enough, like it could like escape gravity. And if it does escape gravity, then it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling thing. Like there's more demand for UST because like people have more faith in it, and because of that, Luna becomes like more desirable, and then people want to build on Luna, which creates economic activity on Luna, which means UST is backed by this economic activity to a degree, right? So it's pretty complicated. Like right now, I'm just sort of like, okay, I'm really like just left curving this thing, basically. I'm like, ooh, 20% interest rate, and Do Kwon is backing it, Like, I don't even think of it as like a crypto project, really. I kind of think of it as just like a tech startup, and the founders raised like, $10 billion to back the thing, and they're paying, like the way I look at it is they're paying me as a user to use their product, and I'm just using their product, and I don't really have any illusions that this is like actually going to be a sustainable long-term thing, but like, I like earning 20% on my cash.
And then the right curve way to think about it is like, well, one day they'll escape these Ponzi-nomics because they've created some real economic activity on their platform. So back to your extremist analogy, they currently have about 30 billion in total value locked. And I think the USD stablecoin is at like 17 billion. Sounds right? Most of that activity seems to be from Anchor. So I think half of it, I'm looking at DeFi Llama right now, like half of it is in Anchor, and then there's some that's in Lido, which you can stake Luna in Lido. I think that's about a third of it. So there seems to be this concept of there's more demand than just the yield, and that's what's going to hopefully escape the Ponzi-nomics and turn into something that has potentially real value. And I think they have some traction in South Korea as far as being used as a stablecoin. Terra is like linked in one of the main wallets there called Chai, and so there actually is people using the stablecoin to purchase some things, but it seems to be primarily focused on creating DeFi activity, a DeFi economy to kind of, I don't know, support the value or create real demand for UST. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept, right? And it feeds into something I believe, which is that like the baseline desire for people in the world is to basically like hold dollars and be stable, right? And that's like actually the biggest thing that crypto can actually enable for people.
Right.
Like most people, like people in Turkey, like yeah, the lira is getting wrecked, but do they want to hold Bitcoin? That thing went down 50% in like 2 months. Like, you know, we can kind of make these claims that, well, in the long run it goes up, and sure, that's true, but like that's just not like how humans behave. That's not human psychology. Mm-hmm. You don't want to lose your money in the short run. And if you have the choice between holding the lira, a digital version of the US dollar, and Bitcoin, like the vast majority of people who like need money every day are going to pick like a digital version of the dollar. So it kind of makes sense to me to start like an Ethereum type ecosystem, which is what Luna is, right? It's sort of like a smart contract platform, but it started from the basis of like people want stablecoins,
right?
Yes.
Right? Like Ethereum doesn't have an analogous thing where you can like burn ETH for a stablecoin. It's not like, that's not how the Ethereum blockchain is. So on that principle, I do think it's an interesting experiment because it does sort of fit my baseline model for what is truly appealing to people at like the very basic layer with this stuff.
Let's talk about the news.
Yeah. So the biggest news is that I think in the last 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, Do Kwon has announced that Terra will be using kind of the foundation money to purchase Bitcoin as a reserve asset to UST. So let's say the mint burn scenario, mechanism doesn't work out. There'll be billions, and he says up to potentially $10 billion worth of Bitcoin backing this thing in the future. So using, for maybe the first time, using Bitcoin as a reserve asset to a currency. I think to date they bought 1.5 billion, and he's claimed that at some point it'll get to 10 billion. But essentially, it seems like been in the hundreds of millions market buying Bitcoin. It's a little odd that he announced it before he had fully purchased the amount that he was intending to do, maybe for a little ego boost or whatnot. And I think that the idea is that for a portion of UST, we'll go to using Bitcoin as the reserve asset instead of using the mint burn mechanism with Luna as the way to make sure it pegs. So that was a big announcement. Obviously, Bitcoin maxis loved it because I guess maybe a little controversial. I wouldn't say loved it completely, but it's the first time is their precious Bitcoin being used as a reserve asset and kind of fulfilling its vision, I think, as the best kind of reserve commodity to back a currency.
I'm sure that will be discussed this week at Bitcoin 2022. What was it that you said happens at that event, Nick?
I just confused what people do at a Bitcoin conference. And I joked that, like in the thread, they're like, "What do you there was this joke about people getting mad at people who love ETH, sitting around and jerking off and watching the burn from EIP 1559." And I was just joking around that what else do you do at a Bitcoin conference? Like sit around jerking off to the halvening. Like there's nothing to do. You just talk about holding your Bitcoin or maybe buying more and never selling. And
that's why.
What are these?
That's
tracks?
why Kathy Wood and Jordan Peterson are there to speak, because you just need some entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have to report back.
I will.
All right.
Yeah. I am going there. That's what
you are.
To. Yeah, I leave tonight.
Yeah, I look forward to the latest. I don't know, how do people feel about Taproot?
Okay. Is that a question I should?
You don't even know what Taproot is.
No, tell us.
Yeah, no, it's just that was the latest hype thing in Bitcoin. You know, maybe I don't know. That was probably after volcano bonds, but it was just an update to the network.
Good thing our podcast isn't just about Bitcoin, because we would have a 3-episode.
You have nothing to talk about.
Podcast.
So, what did Bitcoin do this week? Nothing. Good.
Check.
Good.
Pretty sure that's the name of a podcast.
What Bitcoin did, talk about a ironically named podcast. Nothing. It did nothing. That's
Well, see you later. And now from our sponsors.
we love Bitcoin, but
we do.
Yeah, I think maybe this is a start for living its vision out, and maybe
That's
one
super
day
cool.
a nation state might stack some Bitcoin to kind of back their currency at some point.
So, any closing thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, it's just more of a thing to put out there for people. I hold a lot of UST. I do. There was a while where I was like, I don't want to buy this. I don't want to be in a Ponzi scheme. It's gonna it's gonna like death spiral to zero. And then I was just like, there's just a bunch of rich people who are kind of backing it and paying a lot of money, and they're gonna buy 10 billion in Bitcoin. Like, it's way better if it's backed by at least if it's backed by Bitcoin, it can't
partially
death. It can't really like death spiral
to zero.
Yeah,
to zero.
Yeah, it could go just back to the.
Yeah, I mean, algo stable purists will tell you it's destined to go to its like fractional reserve rate, which is what happened with iron. It went to 4%.
Right.
Went to 4 cents on the dollar, which was the amount that it was backed by actual stuff. Yeah.
I think the optimistic view is that there is this stable coin that can scale, that's backed by Bitcoin. Bitcoin holders are a fan of it. The pessimistic view is like, this is another thing that could be a house of cards for it could affect the crypto market in general. There's $17 billion of USD stablecoin out there, and it's kind of like a potential systemic risk. So I think those are the two kind of camps.
Interesting place to earn yield, right?
True.
And I think it's worth mentioning too that UST recently made a huge push to deploy to the Avalanche ecosystem. Like, Anchor is actually on Avalanche now.
Huh.
There's massive liquidity for UST in curve pools in Avalanche. So if you want to get UST on like a EVM compatible network, which is good because you can just easily bridge from Ethereum to AVAX. You don't have to do anything. It's like kind of like, it's basically the same thing, right? Before it was tricky to kind of, you want to get UST on Anchor and you bridge it over via the Terra bridge. It's weird, but yeah, now you can go on, if you got USDC not earning anything, well, you can bridge it over to AVAX, and you can just swap it for UST and Curve, and you can put it in Anchor and earn 19.5%. Like, if you've got faith, but just kind of know what you're getting into.
All right, so let's move to the next topic. Let's talk a little policy.
Yeah.
So the Biden administration released their, I think it's a 2023 budget, and every presidential administration issues their budget for the year, and Congress still has to approve it. So I think before we get into this, it's good to know that like whatever the administration sets out as their budget is not necessarily what's actually going to happen. It just kind of signals their priorities and what they deem important and what they would like Congress to approve and prioritize in terms of spending. And I think the thing we want to talk about.
How are you doing over there? A little dry?
I need to fill up. Yeah. And so what they're, I think the thing we want to talk about is the billionaire tax. And they've talked about.
Does this affect either of you, by the way?
Not yet.
Are you guys billionaires
Not yet.
yet?
If I yield at 20%, maybe in 100 years.
Okay. Just checking back in. Every 5 years, I'm just going to ask you guys.
Sadly not a billionaire yet.
Yeah, one of you guys could sneak under the radar, probably. And,
usurp.
Yeah, usurp and not tell anyone.
It would be if I just bought that Bitcoin in 2009.
Or held it.
Didn't sell it.
Yep.
No, the 2013 Bitcoin's only worth like 80 million.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
No big deal.
Sorry. You should sip your wine while you...
while you
help.
weep?
Yeah, while you weep. So they talked about this 20% billionaire tax.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny because it's a billionaire tax, but I think it's if you have over $100 million or $100 million of income in which this kicks in. So I don't know if it's
not actually a billionaire tax.
It's a centimillionaire tax, I think is probably the best way to go through it. But I think and it's hard for me to describe it because I think of it as inherently illogical, but they're trying to implement a 20% tax on income, which includes unrealized gains. Is that how you understand it?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say a centimillionaire bought some Tesla stock and it went up a lot, and they haven't sold it. They still want to tax you on those unrealized gains in which that centimillionaire has yet to actually cash in on. And so before we get into the issues of that, I think that's the basis of the tax.
So how do we want to tackle this? Because there's so many components to it. There's the component of like whether a tax like this should exist in some form, and the arguments for and against that, and what can happen to a society where that does or does not exist. There's the actual argument for like if you were the one receiving that tax, how you would actually even mentally and tangibly like deal with it. Like where do you get the money, assuming that most of your wealth is tied up in illiquid assets. There's a lot there.
I mean, I'm going to assume most of our listeners don't have $100 million.
No, so maybe the more philosophical question of like what this means for everybody else is important. I think most people want to tax billionaires and the ultra wealthy because they want things to be more fair. So maybe we tackle that.
Yeah,
Does this make
I think
things
it's
more
sort of
fair?
like, yeah.
Is there an absurd amount of wealth tied up in a very small percentage of people, and we should tax them? Let's tackle that question. Should we be taxing these people?
Well, I think the first question is like, is there an absurd amount of wealth tied up in a small percentage of people, right? I think the answer to that is yes. But like, I think a more interesting question is like,
you got to stop doing the thing with the Just hold it.
Just hold it,
please. It's kind of a cute little shtick you got, but yeah.
I need like one of those mics, like
just
the Sham Wow guy has, or it's just like kind of like a headset.
That actually be pretty good. Isn't that what the all-in guys do? Some of them,
good.
Yeah, they just hold it. Maybe that's because they move so much.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, so I think the more interesting question is like, why is there so much wealth tied up in these people? It's probably largely, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but a large reason of it is like the monetary policy, right? And we kind of just keep printing a bunch of money, and they're like the closest ones to the money printer.
Yes, I love that, by the way, in the last episode. Great clip.
Oh, the
performed very well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I do agree with that at a high level, and I agree that society shouldn't look like that at a high level. But then it's sort of like, what do you do? Sure. And I can sort of get behind the generalized concept that like this is sort of the fault of the government in the first place, right? But this is like one of the problems with like government policy, generally speaking, is you try to fix a problem, but then you cause like 4 more problems. So then you make new policy to fix the 4 problems you caused, but then you cause like 8 more problems, and then you kind of just repeat this sort of.
Sounds like how we handle medicine and disease.
Kind of, yeah. You know? So we're at the point right now where government has sort of created a lot of these gnarly financial outcomes where there's this like terrible distribution of wealth, but now we're trying to use more government to try to get it back, and then on top of that redistribute it in the proper way so that it goes back. And it's probably just not going to happen. But I don't have a problem with it on like a principle level, because I do think a lot of people who got really rich off of like stocks, for example, it's not because they're smart or they did anything. It's just like we pursued this kind of egregious fiscal policy that just made people who own stocks rich. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, and like I don't really think that they were completely. I don't think like they're everybody's like, oh, just contributing to the economy by owning stocks and being capital. That's true to an extent, but also not really. So yeah, I don't have a problem with this at a high level, but again, it's in the implementation of it.
Right.
There's going to be like weird side effects. Like people are going to have to be selling vast amounts of stock, for example, to pay these taxes.
I mean, let's just get down to the logistics of it. So let's say you have a private business that has gone up in value. I think for people worth that much, you can't use like a laundromat or like dry cleaners as like an example. But let's say their company went up in value. It's illiquid. They can't necessarily like trade those shares in the stock market. Let's say it's a private company, and they're going to owe 20% on those unrealized gains. Like, how do you actually turn that into cash? You can't. Or let's say it's even more simply like real estate. Yeah. Real estate has gone up. How do you turn that into cash? to order to pay that tax, you'd have to sell those assets. So you create this cycle
and
in
in
which
that case, it's terrible because you can't take a little piece of that asset. Like you're talking about selling an entire home.
You're saying you'd rather solve the root of the problem.
So, I mean, I think that's a beautiful idea, like to want to solve the root of the problem first and like eradicate this issue of like a certain number of people like just becoming uber wealthy.
But does
Like,
solving the
sure.
root of the problem fix the distribution problem? Even if you solve the root of the problem, don't you still have to redistribute the money somehow?
Yeah, and so who do you want to redistribute that money? Do you want effective, efficient capital allocators, or do you want the
Capital
government,
allocators, yeah.
which is proven to be an inefficient capital allocator?
But how do efficient capital allocators actually redistribute the money?
Well,
Like, how does the money get redistributed by the quote unquote market?
I guess it potentially for those people goes back and investing in businesses.
But aren't they just like buying stocks and then the
Assets.
companies just do buybacks and then, you know,
But you're talking
is that
about on an
really getting back to people like who need it?
Potentially not. Potentially not.
Yeah, I would say probably not. But like, what do you do? What I'm wondering is it any different? So you want to redistribute money. You want people who have less money to have more money. You want to have the money shift places. This may sound like a dumb question, and maybe some economists out there will be cringing when I say this, but is there anything different between like taxing these people in some way that can be exploited or is inefficient, giving the money to the government, and then redistributing it back to the people at probably like 30 cents on the dollar after
Right, because of all the bureaucracy and
Worst part.
Right.
What's the difference between doing that and just like printing a bunch of money and then shipping it to everybody in the form of UBI?
I mean, the velocity of money probably is one.
But I get that would be inflationary, right?
Yeah,
but if we're giving it to the government and they're just sending it to everybody anyway in the form of all this other stuff, like how different is it from just like sending everybody checks?
It's less efficient.
Right, but isn't that a good case for just sending everybody checks and not bothering with just dilute all the billionaires?
I mean, take the extreme case. You could send everyone $1 million, but it's not like they're going to have $1 million more of purchasing power.
But isn't that effectively what the same end result would be of like wealth taxing and then sending all the money back to people in like a different form, except you're doing it like less efficiently? Like, are we just creating like inflation either way, but in one way that we're creating inflation, we're getting a bunch of bureaucrats rich in the middle and doing it less efficiently? Like,
Yes.
Are we just kind of screwed either way, but we may as well just hand the people the money directly?
Yeah, but I mean, how much money are we talking about raising? Isn't it just like $100 billion every year from this centimillionaire tax? Like they're talking about it reducing the deficit 1.3 trillion over a decade. So, I mean, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not enough to like really move the needle. I think in the terms of like pure redistributing wealth into individuals.
I mean, that's probably true. But like the problem is that people at the bottom can't like afford things anymore, right? It's not even so much like this guy is way richer than me. I hate when people say like wealth inequality because it's like it's kind of stupid. Like I don't care if the guy in the room next to me is a trillionaire if I have like $20 million.
Right.
I'm good, right? Even though there's like massive inequality. The problem is that like the problem isn't wealth inequality. It's that like people can't buy things. Like people can't buy houses. People can't go to college. People can't buy like health insurance and stuff like that. So all these things have been like massively inflationary. I mean, especially like housing, education, and healthcare. Like three things that are pretty important, right? They're pretty darn important. Those are the things that people can't afford anymore. And I'm obviously thinking out loud, and I get it. If we just like hand everybody like 10 million, we just write everybody like $10 million checks because we mint like a $30 trillion coin and just send everybody like $10 million checks. Yeah, the price of everything will go way up, and you might end up in a situation where everybody's kind of in the same position, except now they're a millionaire, but they can't afford the house because the house costs like $28 million,
right?
You know, which isn't useful.
Yeah, I think Elon has a good quote about this on taxing billionaires. He says, it doesn't make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill at capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government. Mm-hmm. And his quotes go on, but he's essentially saying that, like, you know, we can trust that people who have been good at capital allocation to put it in the areas where it needs to in the most efficient way to distribute capital into the economy versus having the government do it. Because even if they do put it into underserved areas, there's this like filter of bureaucracy that has to go through, and pennies on the dollar actually get to the people that actually need it.
But what I'm hearing from Steven is like a very valid point in that if you allow the market to take care of it, if you allow the billionaires to stay in the position of capital allocation, like, do the people that really need it get it? And I think the answer oftentimes has been no, and that's where there's a lot of anger and resentment in society in general.
Yeah, I mean, my larger problem with that take isn't that it's wrong. It is definitely true that you are taking money from efficient capital allocators and you're putting it into the hands of people who like burn money. But I think the people who are sort of more on the like socialist end of the spectrum like do have like a very good point, which is that like Elon Musk Elon Musk especially, like him of all people, he did not get rich just because he was good at allocating capital.
Right.
He also got rich off the back of selective government policy. In his instance, two particular government policies. One was the decision to sort of like subsidize and funnel money to renewable energies, which we could argue might be a good thing, but it still did get Elon richer, right? But then the other thing is like this generalized kind of era of like quantitative easing has just sort of funneled easy money into the hands of people who have owned assets, right? And it's not necessarily because they allocated capital efficiency. Like a good deal of the reason they are rich is because people in government just sort of arbitrarily decided that they would be rich by arbitrarily electing to pursue particular policies that were not what like the free market would do. So isn't it rational to ask some of that to be clawed back in some particular way?
Well, I think like, and I don't know what Elon's thinking, but in general, I'd imagine he's thinking that like you need economic growth in order to help everyone, right? When there's economic growth, there's job growth, there's wage growth, and everyone hopefully wins in that scenario when there's economic growth. And so how do you want to spur economic growth? Do you want the investment to come from the government, which is a bad capital allocator, or investors who have been particularly good capital allocators? And there are probably parts of the government where it makes sense for them to invest, like scientific research and other parts of the economy where, you know, maybe we want the government to subsidize certain parts of the economy to spur future economic growth. But the idea, I think, in general, is that we need growth in order for everyone to kind of lift up and benefit from it.
Well, what do you say to the guy out there who's like, I can't buy a house, and Elon Musk is worth $300 billion, and he's probably worth, you know, an extra $200 billion than he would be worth if it were not for government policy, you know? Let's give it to him. It'd be like, he'd be worth $50 billion. But now he's worth $250 billion, right? Like, what do you say to that?
And he's not going to get a job at Elon's new tech company that's supposed to take down Twitter.
Like, what does that guy? Probably won't qualify. How are you going to convince that guy that growth is going to save him? Because, like, I would argue that a lot of these companies, like a lot of this, like the whole buybacks thing, right? Like the fact that like Apple is like sitting on all this cash, and they're not investing it in growth, right? They're like, we're just going to buy back stock. We can't. We don't even think it's like profitable to reinvest it in the company.
Right.
Like, what do you say to that? Like, that's the thing that I struggle with.
Yeah, I think on an individual case, it's tough. Like, I struggle with it too. You know, like if you're looking for any individual salary or hourly wage to lift you out of, you know, some kind of economic problems, it's tough, especially in this environment. Like, you still have to own assets in order to get out. And that's something that Eric mentioned in a few episodes ago. So I don't, you know, I agree. I struggle with it too, in terms of, you know, how do you reconcile that to an individual person? But I don't know if they're necessarily related. Like, I don't know if there's a high correlation to that to that person not being able to afford things and one person, next door making a lot of money. I don't know if they're correlated. It may be that it's an inconvenient thing and it's sad and it feels not right, but I don't know if there's like a practical reason or strong correlation or causation between the two. It's kind of conflate the issues together.
Doesn't it just make logical sense though? I mean, you have a bunch of people living in the city, and imagine there's one guy in the town who owns tons of stocks, and it's like 2008. And he's like pretty rich dude, and he owns tons of stocks. And then nobody else in the town owns any stocks. Everybody's just having a good time. They're just living in their houses. And then the government basically comes in and they just sort of decree, well, anybody who owns stocks now, you're just going to get really rich over the next 10 years, right? So that one guy now gets tons of cash because of that government policy, because all of his stocks go up. Well, he's like, I don't want to own this many stocks. Well, what does he do? Well, he turns around and he's like, oh, interest rates on housing are also really cheap because the government's been holding interest rates down. I guess I'll take all this money that I earned in my stocks going up from this stupid government policy, and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to buy half of the real estate in the town. Well, now he's pushing the price of all the real estate up, and maybe also like he's like too rich to care about renting it out, or like he's going to be like, oh, I get a higher return from Airbnb. Well, now that policy has caused this guy to get rich. It's caused him to buy this house, all this housing. It's pushed the prices up, and it's also caused the distribution of people who live in the housing to not be people who live in the town who want to like live in the house full time. And now you have this like awkward situation whereby like increasing the price of stocks via QE, you've also caused people to not be able to afford houses.
Right.
And you can kind of see how they would be linked. I'm not telling you I have like a magic solution for how to unwind it. We should have never probably done it in the first place, right? But this is the problem now. We created like a huge issue, and we keep stacking these like government interventions on top of like 30 other government interventions. Like, I think the main takeaway for people, right, is that like what was the Biden budget, like 6 trillion?
Yeah,
I think it was 6 trillion they proposed, and last year it was 5 trillion, right? Mm-hmm. So we were already talking last year about like, holy crap, what the hell are we doing? And then we increased it like 20% this year, while we're like 7, 8, 9%, 10% inflation. Those are the government numbers of inflation. Yep. It's really like 20%, right? And we increased the budget by 20%. So I think the takeaway for people is that like the politicians they're telling us what they're going to do. Like there's 2 ways out of this mess, right? One is sort of like the austerity route where you let everything fucking deflate and there's tons of pain. And I'm not even saying that's the right thing to do. But I think it's pretty obvious that no politician in the U.S. has the balls to do that. Nobody's going to do that. They're all going to try to inflate it away or land the plane softly, and I don't think they're going to be able to. But for people like listening, it's like, what do you do? Like, I think the best thing you can do is to just allocate your capital for that environment over the next 10 years so that you can at least ride that wave and try to escape it, as opposed to getting caught in all of this and just you're going to be like reliant on whatever handouts come your way from the billionaire tax or from the UBI or whatever people try to do at the top to redistribute income to you. But it would be better to just invest in a way where you just acknowledge that the car's driving off the cliff and you're just going to ride that in the way that's most profitable to you and try to survive that crash landing, you know?
Via UST 20% yields.
There you go.
The funny thing is that the UST 20% yields, they're like barely breaking even.
I know, you're barely breaking
like
even.
Inflation.
Well, I mean,
imagine not having UST. You're like just losing 20% a year in your bank account. It's nuts.
So I think it's good to explore, but I think practically this thing's not going to pass. Joe Manchin's already said, and he's kind of the deciding vote in these topics that kind of seem. He's kind of middle of the political spectrum, and he's already shooting down the billionaire tax plan. But I think it marks a signal of what the Democratic Party will shoot for, and it'll definitely impact the midterm elections coming up in November in which way people vote. So if you want the billionaire tax, you'd probably vote Democrat, and if you don't want it, you'd probably vote Republican, regardless of any other issues potentially. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to necessarily pass. So we'll see how it plays out.
I think the parties are basically the same now fiscally. Yeah. I think it's just like this weird culture war divides the parties now. But I think they're both kind of like going to end up being fiscally populist, you know?
I mean,
They're both just going to spend money.
Every party that gets in power, just ends up spending more money.
And probably even more so now. I mean, it went off the rails with like Bush. That was like 13 years ago, or even more. Like, you just running the printing press back then. He was a quote unquote.
We talked about in previous podcasts. Even Reagan, he spent more and increased the budget deficit.
Yeah, it's all just sort of it's like a facade. They all just spend money. You have to acknowledge that government basically just wants to grow and spend more money, and you have to sort of just invest with that long-term thesis. I don't think it's ever going to go the other way, and you may as well just ride the wave instead of trying to fight that.
It's hard to have to beat like a 20% hurdle on your investments. It makes me sad.
I mean, yeah. So for 99% of people, conclusion is buy crypto.
Buy assets.
Buy stable coin.
It's an interesting question if you should be buying crypto right now. I can see a lot of arguments for and against.
At the very least, as you made the analogy of the lira earlier, right? You buy stable coin, you get your yield. You at least don't lose.
Well, I think in like the long run, right?
Yeah.
Like if you depreciate people's money so much that even if they're holding like bonds, they're still losing like 4% a year in real terms. What that does is it makes people go like, well, fuck it, I may as well buy Ethereum. At least if that goes up,
you move up the risk curve.
Yeah, like you when you make real rates negative, that is like the interest rates like net of inflation. So you could have a 6% interest rate on your bonds, but your real rate could be negative 4% if inflation's 10%. Like in that environment, a lot of money is like, why would I bother holding bonds? At the very least, I may as well hold like stocks, and then like growth stocks almost become like, muni bonds, and then like super high like risk tech stocks become,
bonds.
Just bonds a little more out on the risk curve, and then like crypto just becomes like stocks. It's just like everything shifts over because people are just trying to stay ahead, and it's just like a question of like, will that blow up at some point, and how? And do you want to ride that wave, or you just want to sit there and be like, all right, I'm just gonna lose?
You need a lot of friendship in the future. You need friendship to make sure you're investing in the right things, and if it all implodes, if we won't have money, at least we'll have friendship.
And mushrooms.
So
wow, good segue.
Yeah, so
I think it's like a B- segue.
I wasn't in on this last weekend's trip.
So harsh.
But you guys went on a little boys trip.
Yes.
For friendship.
Yeah, Steven, do you want to feel like you're excited about this mushroom segment?
Yeah.
I'd like you to prop it how you might.
Yeah, I did a lot of mushrooms last weekend.
Really?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, you were there.
How did me?
Yeah.
Who?
You were next to me doing like a rain dance or something. It's weird.
Look at the
whatever
crypto
rain
market.
dance you did, crypto went up. So I texted you guys, just keep doing whatever you're doing because it's working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How was your weekend, Steven?
It was great. My only regret is I didn't do more mushrooms.
This was what he was saying the entire time, by the way.
Were you near breakthrough and then?
I was so close. I felt like to having like a real life epiphany. Like I could see the vision of it like right there in front of me, and then I started fading back into reality, and I was like, no.
So when you do mushrooms, is it kind of like this like almost near death experience? So imagine you're about to like get in a car crash and potentially die, and it's like a split second,
Not
right?
even.
But then you expand that split second into like potentially
I don't
hours,
know what Steven
and then
is looking
you're
for.
able to like.
Yeah,
I don't.
I
What's it
don't
like?
know what I think Steven was trying to blast himself into a place where his mind could just get out of the way, and this like godlike moment would step in and give you answers. Is that like kind of you wanted that like full blown psychedelic experience?
I wouldn't object to that. I didn't.
Yeah, you wanted like to just like.
Yeah, I didn't care about the colors. I just wanted to have like some insights.
What we had. So first of all, I haven't done mushrooms in years, so I was actually a little bit nervous because in general, even with cannabis, which I do, smoke weed really infrequently, but when I do, I get really high. So I have to find like old school 60s dad weed. It's my favorite. Nice light joint, and even that light joint of like 15% THC will take me to the moon. And the places that it takes me, the level that I can extract from the experience of being a little bit high is a lot. So I just know that about myself. So I was a little bit nervous with mushrooms because I've only done them maybe a few times, maybe 3 times ever. And all my experiences were good, but none that were just like absolutely mind-blowing or anything like that. Now, the technology has gotten so good with mushrooms.
Wait, the technology of mushrooms?
Oh my God. Can we talk about these bars?
Should we shout out the Wonka bars?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Like, what's? I've never talked about.
You guys have
drugs
branded
on a
illegal
podcast.
drugs?
I've never talked about.
This is
drugs.
amazing. They were like just like the Willy Wonka chocolates.
Let
They
me-
even had
let
like
me
a
grab
golden
it.
foil,
Let me grab
like a golden ticket inside and everything. It's for sure copyright infringement, but
Isn't there like some kind of supply chain tracking to whoever's manufacturing
Look,
these
I
things?
don't ask questions. I just eat the mushrooms.
I mean, this is okay to do, right?
Yeah,
Can we?
this isn't like Thailand
show?
or Singapore.
So here they are.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can see an arm
I'm
on screen.
showing them on YouTube right now.
Can't wait till we
Dude.
get a sponsorship.
Look at this. 7 grams of magic mushrooms. Look at the back. You would think you bought this in a store. Only the highest quality Matias Romero magic mushrooms are used in making this chocolate bar. And it shows you like, hey, warning, microdose to start. See how you feel. Make sure you're in a safe environment. I love this part. You can always eat more, but you can never take back what you ate. And it gives you a little, if you eat 1 to 4 or 5 to 8, this is what it might feel like. So anyway, I hadn't had experience like this. The best experience I've had other than this were those chocolates that are like made by a friend. And so anyway, traditionally when people do mushrooms, it's like disgusting, and you have to do things like blend them up and lemon teching and all this kind of stuff just to be able to get it down.
Nah, you just eat them.
Yeah, or you could just eat them. You could just be a badass and eat them and have a nice little hero journey. So anyway, the technology is greatly improved, and I mean, if you do a little bit, it's like having a couple glasses of wine. Like, I really don't think you get giggly, you get happy, you feel connected to everything around you. So the first day, we were on a hike, and we were like, okay, we're going to be on a hike. Let's not take much. Let's like make sure that we're just this is a micro. And it was amazing. It was just like so tuned into the environment. The breeze felt beautiful. I mean, Yaniv was funny, just talking about his prior experiences as well, and like, just funny things, like you feel like the trees are breathing is what he said. And then the beautiful thing about us and this group and this friendship trip was that everyone was on the same page around this idea that setting, where you are and who you're with is the most critical part of this whole journey. And that what you talk about, for me, I never said this out loud, but I wanted to make sure that everything that was like discussed was always also, that's a major part of that set and setting. So like everyone was very intentional and conscious of what was being discussed. I even remember, Stephen, on the second night, like there was a moment in the hot tub where like this topic came up that was intense, and remember we like skipped it. It was like this idea of like this, for some reason war came up, and we were just like, yeah, let's skip that right now, because you have to be very careful where your mind goes, and you can catch yourself going into like dark spaces. But ultimately, with any psychedelic, and with mushrooms in particular, they can feel a little bit chaotic. They can feel a little bit like it's taking you on a journey, and so you have to be super aware of what you're thinking about and what you're focusing on and what you're doing. I mean, I even remember like the second time started by playing Catan, right? Is it Catan or Catan?
I think it's Catan.
Okay, I'm so glad I'm not. You're the pro Catan player. I thought that was going to be like blasphemy to even ask that question. So Catan,
It's arguable, I think.
started playing Catan, and it got intense, like being so focused on one thing, and they started kicking in a little faster than the day before. And as soon as we switched gears and went in the hot tub, it was just like way calmer, turned some cool music on. I have this playlist on Spotify called like Pura Vida, just chill tunes. Immediately changed everything. So I say that because I think a lot of people are interested in this kind of stuff, and maybe they don't have access to Wonka bars or whatever. But as somebody who's very sensitive, tends to extract a lot from any substance, even alcohol. Like, I had an amazing time. I had truly an amazing time.
So what's the benefit? Like, if someone's listening and hasn't done it before, like, what's the...
Increased openness.
Okay.
If you want to get technical.
Clarity? Because that sounds interesting.
Absolutely. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of truth, a lot of clarity. I think, again, back to Steven's, I think Steven wanted the bomb of clarity. I'm sure you got a lot as well as I did, Steven. I had a ton of little moments, little epiphanies. We all want that big one, but I had so many little epiphanies about ways that I was living or things that I was doing, just thoughts I was having to myself that it's now Wednesday, it's only been a few days since, and like they've impacted me. It truly, like it can truly change your behavior as well. So not only just that openness and clarity, but some behavior change as well, because you become more conscious of like your actions and who you are and what you do. I mean, I think you guys know this stuff about the studies that have come out of Hopkins University, right? Where they work with like terminal patients who have fear of death, who have terminal cancer of some kind or disease, and they do psilocybin, trips with them. Like,
near the end of life, essentially.
Yeah, like this is a person who has some sort of disease or they're terminal and they're just having a hard time. And the number one thing that the thing that they're closely studying that is like the most impactful across every other intervention that they could possibly administer is psilocybin magic mushrooms. I mean, we're talking about, I want to say 80+%, I would have to pull this up. It's at least 80% of people changing their behaviors and or saying, I no longer have a fear of death and I'm okay now.
Wow.
Like massive, massive levels. So there's so many benefits. Like that's just one, slice of the pie. But
yeah. I think it's like totally backwards in my life that I do mushrooms like 3 or 4 times a year, and I drink like 150 times a year. I feel like it should be the opposite.
Yeah, you were saying this. Like
Yeah.
to come home and do a little bite of chocolate and then be good 2 hours later.
Yeah, I mean, I
Go to
feel
bed.
like when we drink, it's like inherently sort of like a numbing thing or like a coping thing or like I want to be a different person thing. It's like inherently like a masking thing.
Alcohol as a whole.
Yeah, alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. I think mushrooms are interesting because they do like the opposite.
It's
of
the
that.
opposite of escaping.
It puts you like so completely in the moment, and then you like are able to. The sensory experience is like really interesting. Like I'm very colorblind, but for some reason like I can see colors when I'm on mushrooms.
Are you able to see
which is
the
really
difference between
trippy.
green and red on the candlesticks on charts? Just to be sure.
Sometimes.
Okay. I feel
Should
better
he be
now.
trading?
Sometimes. But yeah, I think it's interesting that like
No, you're right,
I
dude.
can see
It forces you to
or like
face
if
yourself.
like the frame rate of your vision goes up. Like it's like normally I feel like I live in like 30 frames a second, but then I go to like 120 frames a second. Everything's like really vivid. Like when I'm on the highway, like I can see like the hubcap like turning. Like I can see like the license plates from the other side. It's like super wild. But like more than that, it like kind of puts you just in like the moment of your life, and it like really allows me to just like look at things sort of just like it makes me like a watcher. Like when we were playing Catan's a good example, right? Because normally when I play Catan, I get very angry like all the time.
You
Like,
full tilt.
Yeah, I'm just really competitive.
Watching the two
I hate
games
losing.
the day before when he was not on anything other than alcohol, I guess. I don't even think we were really drinking alcohol. And then the next day when he was on mushrooms was remarkable.
Yeah.
He was like sitting there losing and he's like, I've never had so much fun playing Catan.
Yeah, like David rolled like, an 8 for like the 7th time in a row. And I was like, wow, man, that's so great that you're rolling so many 8s. You must feel so good. And I'm like happy at like how good you feel. And I felt like no ill will. Like if I felt like a sense of like angst or something, it was literally like instant meditation. Like I was like, oh, it's an interesting thought I have, and I just like let it go.
Did you become the watcher of your own
I
feelings?
believe that it slightly slows down the monkey mind, for sure. But what it mainly does is it removes your awareness from the monkey mind thoughts to that watcher of the monkey chatter.
Is there a productivity aspect to this? Like if you take it, microdose it, or let's say you do like a weekend of doing it, are you more productive afterwards, or is this not productivity related at all?
I don't have the data for that. I can tell you that when I'm on like high doses of mushrooms, I can't do anything.
Right. But like if
you can't plan your actions like 3 moves in advance.
No.
But so after that though, like maybe say the week after, the month after, are you more productive?
I don't know. We were talking about doing a quote unquote microdosing experience. Just I mean, I would like to do them more just to see what happens. I would at least like to sub alcohol for. I don't think it would make my life any worse. Like it, like alcohol, like I could feel it like harming me, you know, in like a million ways that like I know that like the mushrooms don't, and it's just weird because there's obviously like way more stigma to mushrooms in society than alcohol.
It's the same thing with weed though. Like weed doesn't harm you nearly as much as alcohol.
Yeah.
Way more of a stigma.
I would be happy to sub out like a lot of my drinking for weed too. I don't want to like stack. I already have like a pretty bad drinking habit, so I don't want to like stack all these things on top of that and just not be in reality at all anymore. I don't think that's good. But yeah, I have a lot of stuff going on upstairs, you know, and alcohol, I feel like I like it a lot because it gives me like a break from it, but it's not like useful as anything other than like it just like kind of turns out the lights for a bit,
right?
But it's not. But like the mushrooms, like I was just thinking about all these things and like problems I have and stuff, and just thinking about them, and like and I was able to like look at them. And I wouldn't get like upset or feel like or triggered or anything. It was just like it's like the state people talk about when you go into meditation, you become like a watcher, right? You're just like, oh, that's like really interesting that I feel like that. I wonder why that is. And then like it just like passes through you.
It really is a beautiful thing.
Comes up.
It is, and we've talked about the book, at least amongst us in personal, Untethered Soul, and highly recommend it for anyone. And even if you don't want to read it, I believe the full audio version is free on YouTube if you just want to like throw it in your ears. Yeah, I've listened to it multiple times.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
When I go into like high stress moments, I just pick any first half of the book and throw it in my ears, and it kind of feels like it's a good reset. But I think like the most important part of it, and maybe what you kind of like experience with psilocybin, is you become a watcher. And when you have like a feeling like jealousy or anger or frustration, because you're the watcher, you realize that the frustration is an object that is not from yourself. And that simple, I think, awareness allows you to realize that I am not jealous. There's this jealous thing that I am feeling, but it's an object separate from myself, and maybe that is the whole.
Jealousy is an unconscious reaction,
right?
And an appropriate response is, "Oh, I feel jealous."
Right.
That's like an awareness, and it's appropriate to feel. It's like it's normal to still feel jealousy, but identifying with jealousy is a reaction. Stephen would appreciate this from the Sadhguru Joe Rogan episode we were listening to. There's a lot of cool little moments on this friendship boys weekend, and your seat was majorly empty, Nick. But you know, like one part was just listening to Sadhguru in the car, that Joe Rogan episode, and like extracting, and it puts you in the right space, in the right state of mind for a trip like this as well. You know, I think that made a big difference for me. Is like even in the moments, the brief moments I had to myself, like I was making sure to listen to very inspiring, insightful stuff. And then you of course heard about the playlist that was curated as well. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that you guys were intentional about it. You used it in an intentional way. I believe there are Alan Watts meditations listened to. So you didn't just do it in like a free flow. You kind of took it in an intentional way, and I think that's super beneficial.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this ties into your whole dopamine thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I think one of the crazy things was like how few like cravings and compulsions I felt, right? Like it just got me thinking about how like our default state is one of like an anxiety to sort of like fill blank space with some sort of stimulus or some sort of thought or anything.
Right.
Whereas like when you listen to these gurus, right, or the Buddhist people, they sort of tell you that like the default state of light is actually like just bliss if you're able to sort of turn everything off, which is like sounds like a really dumb thing for people, right? But we sat there, like we were just like, it was just very basic and primal, right? We were just sitting next to a fire, listening to music, and like staring at the stars, just in like the company of each other.
These stars.
And we were there for like 8 hours.
Probably.
Like, just sitting there.
When was the last time you
It
did
just
something
pure
like that?
joy the whole time.
Anybody
like,
did something
I never
like that.
wanted to check Twitter. I was never like, oh, I wonder if I have any Instagram notifications. Like, I was just like, the music was like incredible. I was like listening to it, and I felt like I was actually listening to it. And you felt like a connection to nature and the universe with the stars, and a connection with each other. And like fire is obviously like a very primal thing too. Like fire, music, universe, like human company. It was all like very. You're like, oh Jesus! Like I feel like this is sort of like maybe. This isn't even like a drug or hallucinating. I'm just like,
right.
It's not even like I'm adding stuff. I'm just removing things that are preventing me from experiencing like the default state of life, right?
Damn.
Whereas alcohol
That's
is like
it.
adding. It's like adding
That's
this
it.
haze to like make you feel like. But I feel like this was just like stripping away a bunch of everything, and with everything being stripped away, like I was able to just be in the moment and like be happy, and it was really cool.
That's completely really cool. Fucking it.
How do I get that sober? How do I get that feeling sober without?
Well, and you figure it out. Let me know.
I do think that like if you really spend enough time relaxing and getting into a truly like parasympathetic state, you know, you go to the float tank, you get that in, check. You meditate, check. You've been off your phone for like 36 hours, check. You're at a cabin in the middle of nowhere, you're by yourself, check. You're reading books, check. Like you're doing everything right. I really truly feel like I've been in the same space. In fact, I think some of the moments I've experienced, I went to this Buddhist place, I think you know, in Julian, where they don't force you to do anything. You can participate if you want. Otherwise, you're just there in this like cabin place by yourself in the woods. And it was just meant to be a technology detox. I got there for sure. Like I got to the same place. So I really think that it's possible. In fact, I think actually the experience I had, I journaled about it. I maybe told you about this. I don't think I have told anybody other than Erica. Is like, I think I journaled for like 3 hours straight after I did the same thing, like looking at the stars and was in that state of mind already. Again, it's what Steven said. You're stripping away. That's what I think that mushrooms does for so many people. It's like the constant fucking madness of the phone and people, and you actually stop caring what even, not that it was like having your friends there is the best thing ever, but like, I think it's normal for people sometimes to go like, did Steven think that what I said, you know, you have that thought, like, should I have done, all that goes away. It's like, oh, my friends are here. This is nice. I love these people. It's a very heart, without sounding woo-woo, it's a heart-opening mechanism. It really is. And one of the things I appreciate about our friend group is we're not on the woo-woo side where we're like holding hands and standing around the fire and singing songs and brotherhood shit.
Yeah.
And we're not on the other side where we're just like, let's do some fucking shrooms, man, and just get blitzed out of our minds. We're like in this really healthy middle space where, yeah, we like to meditate. We want beautiful experiences, but we also want to laugh. Like I was telling Yaniv this, like especially that night around the fire and the stars and the Alan Watts on and the music, I would switch back and forth between absolute fucking awe that I exist and belly laughs so fast. Like I was just, it was weird. Like every 30 seconds to 1 minute, it'd be like the simplest comment would have me like belly laughs. And then the next comment would have me be like, what I heard, I had this moment. I don't know if you heard this comment, Stephen, where like we listened to an Alan Watts audio, and then the next song that came on was Ludovico, and it was one of my favorite songs of his. And I had this moment, and I like started almost like tearing up to myself, like just like and laughing to myself. And then I said it out loud because I realized it. I was like, oh my God, he's doing the same thing but without words. Like he's really like Ludovico Einaudi, this classical pianist, Italian guy who many people know. If you don't know, it'll blow your mind. His music has so much depth to it, but I felt it for the first time at that level because we stripped away everything. And I had that click. I was like, oh my God, he's communicating mortality and love and loss and grief and gratitude. It was insane. So
Armand is not woo-woo at all.
I don't think that's woo. Is it? I'll take it if it is.
I'm just trolling you a little bit.
Good.
Like when you trade crypto, you get a little FOMO sometimes, or you trade anything, or you invest in anything, you get a little FOMO feels, right? And you get on tilt and maybe make some bad decisions. Does this help you kind of be aware that like, okay, I'm feeling this, I have this feeling of FOMO right now, and it's separate from me, and I'm aware of it now. Does it help you maybe make better investment decisions?
No, I would say I have worse anxiety now because now I'm just sort of even more aware of like how broken I am and like how helpless I am to change it. Whereas before the shroom trip, it was like ignorance, you know?
Yeah.
But now there's just like frustration of like, why am I still like this? Even though I saw it all so clearly, but apparently I'm just like,
maybe my role in this is to like merge a path of a sober way to this, this effect, you know, like,
there you go.
Yeah. Help me out. That'd be all right.
Wonderful. We're gonna go in the mountains for 6 months and shave our heads. And
yeah, I mean, I will say like, and we heard this in the Sadhguru talk. You know, he talked about how we are all like constantly trying to like isolate ourselves from nature. You know, we wear shoes that buffer our feet from the ground, and we build these houses on top of like pavements, and like we're so disconnected like from the land and nature. And he talked about just walking around barefoot and stuff, and yeah, like I definitely felt that vibe when we were just like out there in the desert, just like kind of under the stars, like walking around, and you're like, oh yeah, there is something to this that we're definitely like lacking, especially if you like live in a city in an apartment and you just are never really in nature, you know? Yep. Like the walking on the barefoot thing really struck me because I had all these flashbacks to being like a kid and I had this big lawn in the backyard and I was just always walking around on the grass barefoot, and it like felt like really good, and just rolling around in it and just smelling it, and I don't do that at all.
There's nothing woo about that. And actually science is like spending a lot of time focusing on things like nature deficit disorder and mental health that's related to technology.
Nature deficit disorder.
Oh, yeah,
I like
man.
this.
One of the biggest things that kids are facing today. Yeah, okay. I thought I'd brought it up before, but like it's major. And look, like Sadhguru even referenced some studies on this in his episode as well. But like, I mean, we all know that like the great pandemic is really the mental health pandemic, right? That's really what's been going on over the last 5 to 10 years. And I think doing something like this, regardless of whether you're for or against something like mushrooms, and again, I use myself as an example because I think I'm similar to a lot of people who like don't really want to do this stuff. They don't really have an interest in it very often, but if they do, they want it to be right. They're really particular about it. I mean, this was a big deal for me. Like I've been waiting to do this with like close friends again for a long time, because every time it has come up, I've just been like, nah, not the right environment, not the right people. Like I'm not just doing this to like have a good time. I'm doing this to like really, really have a transformational experience from it. And I think I did, for sure.
Let's just leave you with like one parting thought. Like what do you think would happen if Putin and Zelensky just got together in the woods and just did a bunch of fucking mushrooms? Like they would just stop. They would stop. They would just be like, what are we doing? What am I doing? Like I'm so sorry. Like, you know, and they'd just be over.
God, that would be a trip. Well, these are what the psychedelic these are what the psychedelic maxis believe, right? That if everyone just did psychedelics, like the world would be a better place. Would change.
I could not imagine myself invading a foreign country while on mushrooms.
What do you guys think of that? Like, if people all experimented and would that cause a collective consciousness upgrade?
Probably, yeah.
It probably would.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to the mushroom revolution. We had the weed revolution here in California, obviously, the last few years, but mushrooms are on the horizon now. I mean, I think they're legal in a bunch of
Tim Ferriss
Oregon,
is
right?
investing a lot into this as well. It's a big thing for him, particularly.
It's just sort of like new tech, just like the crypto of mind altering substances.
There's a lot of stigma though, because I even find myself wanting to hold back on this topic. I'm like, a lot of people judge about this topic. Still a lot of stigma.
Yeah, but there shouldn't be.
Yeah, there shouldn't be.
No, not as long as we're all binge drinking.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap, boys.
I agree.
This was fun. That's it. We'll see you guys next time. If you want live and you want to join us, because what we would basically do is right here when we've wrapped, we'll take questions. We'll talk. We'll chat. We'll do that live. Let us know on our Discord. The link is in the description. And jump in the Discord and invite some friends. The link is now open as well, so you can send an invite to anybody to join the Discord. So have at it. Anything else, guys?
No, good. Thank you, Armand.
You're quite welcome, sir. Peace.